that's carried.
Bill, Stephanie got like a hard stop at 8:50. You should be able to make that. Depends on us. Oh yeah, back at you thing. Yeah, there you go. All right, get the buzzer going here. Looks like we're ready. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting for the City of Edina. It is February 16th, 2023. It's a Thursday, 7:30 a.m. And before we call the roll, just reminding everybody we're doing these meetings in a hybrid sort of way. So if you're listening in and you wish to call in for community comment, that's the only time you'll be able to call in today. There is no public hearing matter. And that number is on your screen, and that'll come up fairly quickly right after the approval of the agenda, which follows the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you want to talk to the council, or excuse me, the HRA about a matter of concern to you that's not on the agenda today or scheduled for a future public hearing before the HRA, feel free to call in. There's your call-in number, your conference ID number, and then press *1 to speak to the operator. They'll bring you into Director Benarad. Having provided that information, let's call the meeting to order and call the roll. Our Administrative Support Specialist, Liz Olson, will call the roll.
Commissioner Risser.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Commissioner Agnew.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now we have a form of meeting agenda. Is there anyone on the HRA or anyone on staff that wishes to modify the agenda in any form? Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves. Commissioner Pierce seconds the approval of the meeting agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now it is time for community comment. Let's get that number back up on the screen, please. And if you wish to call in and, as I said earlier, visit with the HRA about a matter of concern to you that's not on the agenda today or scheduled for a future public hearing, feel free to call in. Director Benarad, are you happy or kind of disappointed?
I am lonely this morning. I would recommend that we wait a minute or so if you have no speakers in the audience, as there is a slight delay in the broadcast. I want to make sure we give people ample time to get in. So I'll start watching my clock. Right now it shows that it's 7:33. I'll come back to you at 7:34 or when we have a speaker, whichever's first.
All right, very good. Thank you.
It has been 1 minute and I don't have any callers online today.
Thank you for that. All right, let's move on. The executive director would usually respond to community comments from the prior meeting, but I don't think there are any to respond to. Okay, very good. Next is the consent agenda. Does anyone on the HRA, any commissioner, wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Oh, let's be consistent. And now that you have a quorum, let's remove those 3 so that,
The 3 December meetings?
yeah.
Okay.
Right. So Commissioner Agnew and I can just vote on the meeting where we've been.
All right, let's do it this way. Is there a motion to approve the draft minutes of the special meeting of December 6th, the regular meeting of December 8th, and the special meeting of December 20, 2022?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce. We approve the draft minutes of the special meeting of December 6th, regular meeting of December 8th, and the special meeting of December 20, 2022. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approval of those draft minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now on to the other 2 items, 6D and E. Draft minutes of the regular meeting of February 2nd, 2023, and the Edina Housing Foundation appointments. Is there a motion to approve those 2 items in a single motion?
So moved.
Second.
Member Risser moves, Member Pierce, or excuse me, Commissioner Risser moves, Commissioner Pierce seconds the approval of the draft minutes of the regular meeting of February 2nd, 2023, and the Edina Housing Foundation appointments. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of those 2 items in a single motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, and now we are on to the heart of the meeting, which is the reports and recommendations portion, and Manager Bill Neundorf, our Economic Development Manager, has both of these matters that we will hear next. And I want to tell everybody on the commission that Manager Neundorf put together a really great presentation for one of our condominium associations last night that I spent some time with over at Creekside, and they really enjoyed the presentation. That encompassed both what was going on in the city, what's about to go on in the city, and also a little bit about the Cahill District Plan. They were interested in that, so thank you for that good work. Manager Neundorf, and now on to the business of the day.
Great, thank you. Yes, this morning the first discussion item and action item is a recommendation to prepare additional documentation to consider the use of tax increment financing to help with the financing of the redevelopment of the vacant sites at 7200 and 7250 France Avenue. This is a project that should be very familiar with us. The final zoning just was approved about a week or 2 ago, so that's the project that we're talking about. The conversation this morning is focused strictly on the financing of that project so it can actually be built and delivered. Earlier this year, the developer made a request to use TIF on this project, noting the high costs and some of the challenges of the site. Their initial request was for about $9 million, paid out over a 25-year term of the TIF district. In short, we've spent the last couple months analyzing that request, having a lot of conversation and a lot of negotiations with the development team in the last couple weeks. And we feel that TIF can be used on the site. We can confirm that the site does qualify as a TIF district if we would choose to. We also, most importantly, we have confirmed a budget gap. Without the use of TIF, we don't feel that this project will be able to move forward. The staff recommendation is to address a gap a little bit smaller than the developer's original request. That request came in at about $9 million for the principal value of a TIF note. We're finding a gap of about $7.5 million. We're still using estimates at this point because we'll have more information from the assessor in March and April, so that 7.5 number might change a little bit, but that's about the range where we're pursuing. So I was going to provide some background this morning, touch briefly on some of the aspects of the site that drive the cost up, but more importantly, I think focus on our evaluation and our recommendation. And as a refresher, anytime the city considers the use of tax increment financing, there is a series of steps and actions that are required. Some mandated by state law, some mandated by our own city policies. What we're asking for this morning isn't any final action on anything, but we're seeking your direction to start the formal process to actually give this proposal full consideration, schedule hearings, and do additional negotiations, et cetera. So the slide here shows some of those key steps. We are on step 0. We're asking to get started. So in brief, the background of the site, these are photos of the buildings from 2019 when they actually looked not as horrible as they looked the last couple of years. The site's two separate properties, both developed in the late 60s and the early 1970s as office buildings. Back in the day when France Avenue was a dump, a movie theater, outdoor movie theater, and a lot of gravel pits. These are some of the office buildings that supported those mining operations. Over time, those buildings became some substandard, obsolete in the marketplace, and unfortunately unsafe to occupy. So one of the buildings had been vacant for a couple years. It just wasn't structurally sound to occupy. The developer acquired the sites, put the deal together in the last year and a half or so, and moved forward to demolish to get rid of those bad conditions. These are some photos of back when it looked better. These are from 2019 when we did that first TIF inspection for a previous project, and the conditions just got worse over time. There's been a lot of conversation about this site. It's been going on 9 years now to help or to find a plan that is supported by the community, that can secure zoning entitlements, and that can secure financing. So back in 2014, we had our first proposal. That was denied by the city. 2016 followed. That one was denied. There's a few others in between that staff met with the developers, and they were even worse, and so they never actually even submitted anything formally. 2017, 2018, there was another proposal that was withdrawn. 2018, it started to shape up a little bit, but that one was considered but died. 2019, you kind of sense a pattern here. 2019, we finally had some progress. We had a site that was entitled. They secured their zoning. That coincides significantly with the completion of the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines. So now as a community, we knew where we were aiming. We had a site that was entitled. We actually negotiated a full TIF package. Unfortunately, the costs of that project were higher than the private market would support, even with TIF. That was a $12 million TIF note that was recommended for that, and that project died, and the site's been dead for a couple years, as you've seen. So in the last few years, the developer has explored a lot of options. The site's changed hands. There's different investors that came in and came out. They considered retail, just a simple retail project, bread and butter, make it simple. They considered banking. They considered medical office. We also spent quite a bit of time talking with the developer about this site being the location for the new fire station. We spent several months exploring options there. And ultimately, all of those were rejected by the developer. They just weren't working. We didn't think but the developer didn't think they would pass muster with the requirements of the Southdale plan. And from a fire station perspective, the more we studied it, the more the cost went up, and we felt there were better options for the fire station. So there's been a lot of background to get to where we are today. I just wanted to remind folks that we're here for a reason. If it were easy, it would have happened already. This site is not easy. So the development team is in the room this morning, led by Orion Investments. Ted Carlson and Drew Stafford are the principals there. The ownership group is a little bit deeper, with a variety of owners that have put these sites together and gained site control and are eager to move forward. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the site plan, but what you see here is the site that was approved the other night from a zoning perspective. It is a two-phase development, so the first phase would be all the site work, the sidewalks, the roads, the stormwater, the trails, and then the first office building. The second phase would be the northern site, 7200. The developer is currently working on that and is expecting to come in the next couple months with a little bit more firm proposal for that one. And those are just different views of the same thing. One thing we noticed as we started looking at the site and exploring it in more detail, with all the public elements on here, about 51%, slightly more than half of the site, when it's completed, will be dedicated for public use and public access. That's significant, that's rare, and that's unusual, and it's expensive. These are some images of what those public realm areas look like. Those are from the zoning document. I'm going to fly through some of these, but I think the public benefits of this project are immense. The biggest one is just the fact that we're bringing life and vitality to a site that has been lifeless and a drag on the area for going on 9 years now. Not to mention all the jobs that will be created. It's a tough office market, but what we're finding is that when or as office workers come back, they're looking for a different type of facility, and that's what the developer is planning to deliver. The other most critical thing, and frankly what drove a lot of this entire site plan, is that north-south access roadway on the back of the site. That was really a key that was developed out of the Greater Southdale Plan. An option to provide north-south access without cars having to get onto France Avenue and clog those intersections. So the developer, from the very beginning, that was a fundamental that they were willing to accommodate. Again, it wasn't easy, was not inexpensive, but it delivered what the city and the developer were generally pleased with. The other key aspect is all the stormwater management. Right now, the site's a giant puddle. It takes stormwater not just from its own property, but from all of the neighboring properties. So with this proposal, we would actually address that and take proactive steps to do something proper with the stormwater. And then around the entire perimeter, sidewalks, landscaping, streetscaping, all those public realm and street room type spaces that our design standards strive for, the developer is happy to provide, happy to pay the initial cost, but it does add a lot of cost to the project. And then a public plaza is part of that public realm. Another significant cost item is Edina's sustainability policy. It's nearly $3 million extra to upgrade from a basic LEED certification to a LEED Silver. Our policy suggests that's the right thing to do. The developer is happy to do that, but there's a cost to do that. And then the other key public benefit is a willingness and an agreement by the developer and the contractor to strive to pursue additional diversity, equity, and inclusion in the actual construction and contracting of the project. So a quick summary of how we evaluated this. Right now, the site is valued at just under $11 million by the assessor. So that's the assessed value, not necessarily the market value. Upon completion, it would be assessed at nearly $70 million, or an increase by a factor of 6. Today, the annual property taxes that go to the city, the schools, the state, the county are about $350,000. Upon completion, that would also increase by a factor of 6, and the property tax bill on this site would increase to about $2.1 million. Again, shared by the city, schools, the state, the county, but some staying in the TIF district to pay for the public amenities and public improvements. This project, the first phase, all the site work in the building is valued at about $86 million. Second phase is estimated to cost about $65 million. We worked with Ellers, as we always do, to really scrutinize those numbers and dive into the pro forma and the financials. And what they found was confirmation that there truly is a budget gap here. And that's what's shown on the right-hand side. Regardless of which way you look at it, whether you look at a cash-on-cost return, without TIF, it's a below-market return, and the investors won't go for it. The banks won't go for it. And on a cash-on-cash return, actually looking at the dollars that are brought in on an equity basis, same problem, a 2% return. You can go to U.S. Bank and get 3% right now. So to having a 2.7 return or 2.1 return on a massive $86 million investment is below par. So the staff recommendation is to move forward to provide the use of a TIF note and tax increment financing so that the project can be built and delivered. Important to always remember that the city's policy and just best practice here in Edina is that the developer bears all financial risk. They're responsible for securing the debt and the equity. They're responsible for pursuing grants, if any are applicable here. And they're required to stick to the schedule and to the deadlines and get this thing moving. On the city perspective, we would pledge, or we recommend that we pledge a 25-year TIF district, a typical redevelopment district, and that we provide a TIF note, which is essentially a big IOU, that if they perform and deliver what they promise, we will promise to help pay for that over time. Edina likes to use a TIF note, which is the mechanism that provides the least risk to the city. It's not cash up front. It's not impacting our debt rating or our bonding capacity at all, but we'll just pledge to pay after the developer successfully delivers the project. So the TIF notes, we're recommending 2 notes be pledged since this is a 2-phase project. The total value of the principal amount is about $7.5 million. Again, we'll dive into that a little bit more in the next couple months. The TIF notes would be issued after completion. Again, if they deliver, if they perform, then we'll help pay for what they just built. And of course, we'll have typical lookbacks to make sure that we're not over-subsidizing the project, that if there's a sale of the project, that it's not a windfall for the developer at the expense of the taxpayers. We always have lookbacks to make sure that it's a fair deal at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. I showed some of those renderings of all of the public space improvements. This is a cost accounting of those, what they cost. There's nearly $12 million of costs that are eligible using the city's policy. We're recommending a reimbursement up to about $7.5 million, not the $12 million here. It's also important to note that state statute would actually allow us to count more costs. In Edina, we tend to be a little bit more conservative, but just wanted to make it clear that there's plenty of costs that deliver public benefit at the expense of the developer. So our recommendation is threefold. We recommend that we consider terminating the existing housing district that was created in 2019 and has failed or failed to be built. The second recommendation is to create a new TIF district, a redevelopment type TIF district, and to approve the general terms in this term sheet to include a TIF note valued at about $7.5 million to be payable and pledged upon delivery of all those public benefit improvements. At this point, I'm going to stop with my presentation. I kind of flew through it, even though it took some time. Our full team is here this morning to answer any questions, but ultimately what we're looking for in this item is your authorization to take this term sheet and transform it into a full legal document. Right now, it's maybe a 8-page document. Typical TIF document is 200 to 300 pages. We don't want to start that unless you give us that authorization. So with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions. Our full team is here, as I mentioned. Jay Lindgren at Dorsey & Whitney, Nick Anhut at Ellers, here on behalf of the HRA. And then, of course, Ted Carlson, Drew Stafford, and Greg Brenny on the developer side. With that, I turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, good. That's a nice presentation. Manager Neuendorf, and our thanks in advance, I think, to you. You're a great team. You plus our HRA advisors, Jay Lindgren and Nick Anhut. Thank you for your good guidance here. So what I understand that you'd like us to do here, just in broad terms, is kind of bless the direction you're heading in and do that in the form of approving this term sheet, and then we can head to the next phase to see if, put a development agreement together to see if at the end of the day we really want to agree to do this or not. So this is one step along the way.
Exactly correct.
Okay. All right. Questions from commissioners for Manager Neuendorf? Commissioner Risser.
One of my biggest concerns is we're not really seeing what the second phase of development is going to be. And it appears there's several possibilities. I went back and I watched the public hearings. Earlier, there was discussion of affordable housing, and I don't know where that stands. I know we do kind of have a track record of affordable housing being included in projects, and then when the TIF award is made, somehow that's managed to slip out and is no longer there.
To respond to your question, yes, you're correct. The second phase is a little bit fuzzy right now. The way we addressed it in the term sheet is that it would be, it's on page 3 of the term sheet. The phase 2 would either be a luxury hotel with up to about 150 rooms, or a multifamily housing project with no more than 150 residential units, priced at both market and affordable rates per our policy. So it's likely to be one of those two. We don't know which one today, but yeah, we did want to make sure that if it is housing, that those affordable units are included in that. So if they would fail to deliver that, the TIF deal is defaulted.
Why not wait until we know what the project is going to be? This timing seems off.
Yeah, good question. The reason to move forward now is that phase one is ready to go. The construction season is 2 months away, and they're ready to go if they can get the financing together. So it is moving forward without knowing all the details of what phase two looks like. We have taken some account for that in the term sheet, but I fear if we wait until we know every detail, we'll lose the construction window on phase one, and then we start from scratch again. And I think phase one is ready to go at this point.
Commissioner Risser, go ahead.
Okay, one final question. About we're going for the LEED certification, and that is in sync with our energy concerns and all of that. My concern, and this isn't just for this project, but we also have the Southdale Area Design Guidelines. And I know for another project, that 20-foot requirement for the first floor of the building, I keep thinking about that, and I keep wondering, are we requiring developers to do things that run counter to energy savings? And is this something they really want to do? Also, all the glass on the facade, it's not necessarily about capturing passive solar or anything like that. So I'm wondering, are our design guidelines perhaps counterintuitive or moving against energy savings? And what would the LEED people say? And that's kind of a big question, but.
So I'll put my Kerry Teague hat on this morning. He can't join us this morning. But you're right, there are two conflicting goals. The goal to have additional transparency and that vitality on the street with glass does result in a lower energy efficiency. So it's a balance of both. Right now, they've satisfied what's in the zoning code. Will the zoning code shift and get a little bit clearer over time? It certainly could. But that's really not a part of what what is recommended this morning.
But our design guidelines may be making it more. Our design guidelines may be making it more costly.
Oh, completely. Our design guidelines, I believe, create a better project at a much higher expense.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify, we've got two different amounts, $6 million for phase one and $1.55 million for phase two. These are two separate notes. Okay, just to clarify. So the first note would be issued when phase one is complete, the second note when phase two is complete. Am I getting that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, I think you also answered this in your presentation, but when we've identified $11.8 million of qualifying expenses, it's going to be within this list is what the note will cover, right? So it's just kind of, here's the menu. You can, we will pay for $7 million or $7.5 million of that.
That's correct. We always like to demonstrate, and in fact, our policy requires that TIF be used to offset the public benefit costs. And we wanted to drive home the point there that the public benefit expenses are much higher than what we'll actually be reimbursing them for. So okay. It's a better deal for the city, quite frankly.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question is on Part E, number 4, and part of this is for you, and this may also be for our developers. But in approving the zoning, we talked about the lighting and the safety of the sidewalk crossing at 72nd and France. And my question is, how do we ensure that the finished product does address those safety concerns? Because we did cover that in zoning, I think, I'm remembering, but I want to make sure that what we pay for is really making that a safer place for pedestrians, especially ADA accessibility concerns there.
Yeah, great point. So I haven't read through the entire zoning, but I'm going to trust that what you mentioned did get picked up in the zoning ordinance. And how we typically address that and deal with that is there's a list of conditions that the city engineer drafted that were part of the zoning approval. The zoning is approved subject to these conditions. There's a page from our sustainability division, a page from our engineering division. It should be one of those items on that list. But should we move forward, we'll make sure that we add that to our checklist. We always include a checklist so that when the project is finished, we make sure that everything that was promised was delivered. And if it wasn't, then they don't get paid. So we can double and triple check that as we move forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
All right. Commissioner Pierce.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. On the two TIF notes, and this is just piggybacking on the comments we heard earlier. When we talk about public benefits, it's not quite clear, and you don't have to answer this today, but I would like an answer. It's not quite clear how we decide the value of the two TIF notes, and so one, I think on your presentation was 6%, and the other was 1.5%. Did I get that right? Something like that?
Yeah, about that.
Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. There. Thank you. 6 million and 1.5 million. And so it feels like there's a little bit more risk the city's taking there, given Commissioner Bencher's point about affordable housing and other public benefits. So I would ask us to look at that balance and maybe shift some of that risk to the second phase. I do like the fact that we have the two notes to essentially do that. That's what we're trying to do. My question is more about the valuation of the two. So I would encourage us to look at that differently and shift some of that risk to phase two. This is just and then on slide 25, this is just a pet peeve. Like, I don't like the way we talk about this slide. And I'm going to paraphrase what you said. Essentially, we're saying this project doesn't have a return that's good for the investors without the use of TIF. And if we add TIF, here's the acceptable return for the developer. And so I get that in the big scheme of things. But what I try to do then is to say, all right, as a city, we're an investor and we're going to invest $7 million into this project, and here's what we're going to get out of it. And then what I try to do is take your slide 29, and I try to go, all right, if I approve this, then what am I getting for $7 million? And I couldn't get to $7 million when I looked at this in the way I think of public benefit. I don't think the residents are going to look at site improvements, including site prep, soils, utilities, dewatering. They may not look at that 2.6 as a public benefit, but it's clear. Stormwater management, right? We've had tons of meetings about how to do that. Streetscaping, public art, sidewalks, those types of things, I think resonate with our residents. Some of these other things, I don't think they necessarily do. And so I'm not challenging, is it really 11 million? My ask is, let's be clear what the 7 is. What we think the 7 million is, because that's the investment for the city. That's the return for us. It's not necessarily about getting a good return for the developer. So just a little bit of a different way to think about that. And I think that's it.
We can
That's it.
Thanks for the suggestions. We can definitely address both of those situations. And just as a quick response, the like the slide 29 that's on the screen, the site improvement cost, that's all the stuff that people don't see. So the line item for the road, $867,000 to pave and landscape the road. That's just for the asphalt and the curb. There's all the stuff underneath that they have to build so that there's actually a place to put the asphalt. So that's what's in the site prep category, but we can certainly explain that better, and we will do that at our next visit.
Thank you.
Commissioner Agnew.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a couple of maybe small tactical questions first. Do you know the cost of the temporary parking that is slotted for the Phase 2 site pad? Approximately?
No, not off the top of my head, I do not.
Okay.
Do not.
I can take that offline too. And then on this slide that you have up currently, it says on the side that no Phase 2 costs are eligible. So I'm curious how we're able to offer then a Phase 2 note when none of those costs are eligible.
So that's a negotiating tactic that we take. And that kind of piggybacks on Member Risser's question. The city desires to have both phases built. So it was leverage to build that second phase. Not only do they have market leverage, because they still are paying debt on the land, and it's a huge cost. The way we've negotiated it is that we would give them that full reimbursement upon the second note. So it's just a bigger, it's a tool in our negotiating strategy to make sure that that the second phase gets delivered. If the project is half built, the developer's not happy, but also the neighbors aren't happy, and the city's not happy. So we added the second note. Even though when they build that hotel or the multifamily, whichever is going to be there, none of that is eligible for reimbursement because they've already spent the money up front to build the roads and the sidewalks and everything else. So it's purely just a negotiating tactic.
Okay, thank you. Then I would say that Commissioner Pierce's feedback on kind of spreading that out equally might be a good suggestion that I would support as well. I think overall where I have hesitations about this project is really when we think about what the public benefit is, right? And I obviously saw this come across as a planning commissioner. And a lot of where I feel like we still haven't met the mark is on looking at that north-south connector and in really what the experiences are for, the public plaza and those types of focal points. And especially when that's what the bulk of, really our investment from a TIF perspective is going to be going into, I struggle with supporting something that I don't feel meets the mark that we have as an expectation of the city of Edina. Really what we're looking for, and this is what the South Dell calls for, is an engaging Woonorf, right? Something that brings people and draws people in. And what I'm seeing, according to the site plan, is really an additional sidewalk. They did take the feedback and separate the sidewalk from the road, but now we have a road and a sidewalk. And that doesn't quite speak to me as something that's going to be a north-south connector that is going to be exciting to connect as continued development happens, right? And even looking at the public plaza, knowing that, it's going to be situated next to a office building, I really primarily think that that's going to be used then by people that are working in that office building. That doesn't speak to me as, me with my kids. I'm not going to take my stroller there and zigzag up and down the plaza. It feels, and I know that there are just concerns and constraints with this site in general, given elevation, right? And I know that we have a desire as a city to make sure that all of those walking spaces are ADA compliant. But what that means is that the plaza is really a zigzag of sidewalk. And I don't quite see how that's really a drawing place. I wouldn't, I think of a community engagement of maybe down the road there's a food truck parked there and people come out from across the street and the other businesses in the area and they sit and they mingle and they do that. This space to me doesn't speak to that. And so that's where I struggle with this site in general. there wasn't a question in there.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you happen to recall what the amount of TIF was that was allocated to the prior district for that prior project that they couldn't get financing on?
The last one, that was 2019, and we pledged, if they built it, $12 million in a TIF note.
12 million, yeah. I thought it was more than what's being requested by these developers. And that project still couldn't get financed. Yeah, okay. And the developer's request was 9 million. Staff's recommending 7.55 million. It covers both phases. Good questions asked around that. State law would allow about 12 million in TIF recovery. For some of the TIF eligible costs, and I think this is important to think about, is that part of the purpose of TIF, as I recall from listening to former Council Member Fisher talk about it, who does a lot of TIF work around the state, is that it's really a means of leveling the playing field that for cities like ours that are fully developed with cities that are not fully developed, that are engaged in greenfield development, where they don't have the same sort of challenges of site preparation and having to do all those things to make soils ready for acceptance of buildings put upon them. So though some of these things may not be visible to the public, they're critical to the ability to have this building stand up over time. And do we think that's important? Personally, I think it is. And so some of these items that aren't so visible to me are still critical, just like infrastructure under the street. With respect to the project that we did with the same development group at 70th and France, I recall that the percent of TIF for that project relative to total development costs was up in the 10% range.
That's correct.
Is that right? And that's kind of our, we don't have a rule on that, but that's kind of been our guide. And so here we are at overall about the 7% number. So it's well within the guidelines that we usually follow here. While you've chosen to negotiate this in a certain way, and Commissioner Agnew asked questions about, well, what's if there's no eligible costs in TIF Note 2, why do we have it? That was something you were able to do because of the law. It seems to me that nonetheless, if you want to go to slide 17 and 18, from working on these projects over time, there is a distinct benefit to the 7,200 property, even though there's no TIF eligible cost, because we're kind of heaping all the TIF eligible costs into the first note. And here you got it. This is a better slide, actually. It shows a broader neighborhood. As I recall, this property, because it was once a gravel pit, and we got that low spot behind 7,200, that gathers water now from about 12 adjacent properties. And we've talked over time about how, hey, wait a minute, we should have a role in that as well as the adjoining property owners in solving this problem. This is really more of a city problem than a peculiar property problem to me. And so I think it makes a lot of sense that maybe we aren't allocating TIF eligible costs to the second project, but we know that there are TIF eligible costs there that will benefit that second project. We just happen to be front end loading it to, again, as part of your risk shifting strategy. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I like the notion that 51% of the site, which is pretty remarkable, actually, that it's going to have public use or public access. And to the notion of the WUNRF, I know former Councilmember Staunton was of the same mindset as Commissioner Agnew. Personally, I kind of like the idea that you were separating people from traffic and you had a bigger, wider sidewalk. And the developer can talk about how wide it is, but it seems to me that it's wider than, if I recall, wider than 5 feet. So though they're kind of sharing that same sort of space, they're separated from each other. And I personally like that idea better than the WUNRF and risking somebody driving through there at a high speed, not knowing they're sharing the road bed with pedestrians, you know. And then with respect to that, I thought she had a great comment about the public plaza, you know, how we use that, and maybe the developer can speak to that. But there could be some design element tweaks that go on there that make it more accessible, or how it's used and becomes more integrated to public use. I'd like to hear more about that. But and then I thought, our council member and Commissioner Pierce made a great point. It's not our job to create viability for a development. But if there's a good reason to make a public investment in the project to create benefit overall for our town, then I think there's some heavy thinking that needs to go on. So when I think about the fact that people are entities that are taxing entities, the county and the city and the school district are going to capture the value as it sits now for future taxes through a 25-year TIF district. But at the end of the day, we're going to have property that's worth $150 million in those two phases instead of $15 million. To me, that balancing test, it's well worth the wait to capture that and make that public investment at less than, it's actually on overall about 5% overall. And to me, that's a good thing. So do I think you're headed in a good direction? I do. And I'd like to see what the final product looks like, of course, but I think that you all have done, whether it's developers or our city team, done a good job of advancing something on this site that we haven't been able to puzzle through and solve for about a decade. And it's in a prime location in our town. So those are my thoughts. So is there, the staff would like a motion to authorize them to prepare a full TIF redevelopment agreement and a 72nd and France 2 redevelopment TIF plan based on the term sheet on a term sheet to be approved for future consideration. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Commissioner Jackson moves. Commissioner Pierce seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion passage of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Passed. All right. Approved.
Great. Thanks. We'll work on that and be back to you in a couple months with more details, and we'll strive to address every question and concern that was raised.
All right. Very good. Thank you. You've got a companion piece to this that makes sense. We've got to have a public hearing on this at some point in time. Do you want to set that? So this should be fairly straightforward.
We do, yes. This one is related but different. So Resolution 2023-03 requests that a public hearing be scheduled and convened to fully consider the use of TIF on this project. So what this resolution does is call to schedule that future public hearing, which I think is aimed in early April. So staff, of course, would support the resolution so that there can be a full dialogue and conversation about this proposal.
Okay. Anybody have questions for Manager Newdorf on that motion? All right. The motion would be to approve Resolution 2023-03, requesting that the City Council call for a public hearing regarding the 72nd France 2 Tax Increment Financing District as a redevelopment district. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Commissioner
Second.
Jackson moves. Commissioner Agnew seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And then that's it. Yeah, thank you, Manager Newdorf. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. And then we've got Stephanie Hawkinson that's going to talk about a proposed preservation program with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. And I think we've got Noah Keller from Habitat for Humanity with us remotely. And this is something that we actually talked about at the Regional Council of Mayors meeting on Monday, because I think Habitat for Humanity, we had Chris Coleman, former mayor of St. Paul, who now runs Habitat for Humanity with us, along with some of the staff people, including Noah. And we talked about the project they have underway, or the agreement they have underway with Roseville, which will be, and then they mentioned they were talking to Edina. So here we are.
Well, thank you. And
Manager Hawkinson.
Thank you for that. And Commissioner Risser mentioned this at the last meeting through the unbeknownst crystal ball. So I will try to be somewhat fast because a lot of the information I have is you've seen a lot, but we don't know who is tuning in and what meetings they tune into. So again, I always frame with our guiding documents on what is motivating us, what is directing staff and others to move forward with designing and thinking about different programs in the city. And so the three main ones with regards to this proposal is the comprehensive plan, the race and equity implementation report, and the council equity statement. So I wanted to provide some context on why I'm bringing forward this particular proposal. We have heard for a long time that tear downs are good, but there is a cost as well to having some of these redevelopments of single-family homes. And so as you can see, each year there are a number of modest homes with the average value of 400, mid-400s that are demolished and replaced with luxury homes. In 2021, the last year for which we have solid data, 62 homes were torn down with an average value of $481,000, and the average value after for the replacement homes is $1.7 million. So modest homes, this has grown over time, and our supply of the modest homes has diminished, and they're not being replaced with new construction of these homes. So we created the program with Homes Within Reach that I talked about at the last meeting. It was not getting much traction until we put out a postcard, one postcard at one time only, not for a tear down. And that postcard elicited 53 phone calls from residents who want to sell their home, and they want to sell their home to a homeowner who will raise their family in their home and create memories as they had created. So they wanted their home preserved. And as indicated before, Homes Within Reach has 3 staff people and they work in 14 cities. They can't address, nor do we have the money actually, for 53 homes. And they just don't have the staff capacity to do all that. So I have provided slides similar to this, but I looked at it a little differently. I took deed data of Edina and some of the major industries in Edina from 2020 and 2021. Specifically public administration, elementary and secondary school teachers, and leisure and hospitality fields. And I calculated what those incomes were and what level of mortgage those folks in those industries could afford relative to the payments needed to buy a median-priced home in Edina. And so in 2020, at least teachers and public employees could afford a median-priced home in Edina. And 20 years later, the cost of housing here, the median values have just vastly outstripped the incomes of some of the employees in the city. Again, in the sake of time, I'm not going to go over this too in depth, but we talked last meeting about the Homes Within Reach program, and that through our efforts, we have been able to acquire thus far 10 homes, 7 of which have been sold. And this, before we were able to do 1 home every 2 to 3 years, and in a little over a year, we were able to do 10 homes because of the sponsorship by the city. So, but we do have a capacity issue. So we are losing our modest priced homes. There is lack of incentive by developers to replace homes or even to build homes that are modestly priced. They get a lot more money by building bigger homes. And there's limited capacity with Homes Within Reach. So we want to continue preserving what we can. There's going to be limits, of course. And we don't want to stop the improvement of some of our housing stock, but we do want to preserve some of it too. So we need to engage additional organizations to help with this effort. So preserve home ownership for moderate income households, retain community wealth in home ownership model, enhance residential stability, and serve households with incomes up to 80% of area median income, which is about $82,000, $83,000. So who's Habitat? I don't know if I need to spend a lot of time on who's Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. I think they're a fairly well-known nonprofit in the area, but their focus is to create, preserve, and promote affordable home ownership. They want to create an equitable Twin Cities region where all families can have access to home ownership opportunities, and they have really wanted to work in Edina. And they just previously did not see that path forward, and now we do have a path. So we'd still be working with Homes Within Reach. Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity has the capacity to acquire and rehabilitate these homes, but they, for long-term affordability, for that 99 year to justify our huge investment, they would partner with Homes Within Reach, that once the homes are bought, rehabilitated, at the time of sale to an end buyer, the land would be, I'm sorry, I'm feeling faint, but so if I, my blood pressure just went really down, so I apologize.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I just think I need to sit so I don't fall. This has never happened. So anyway, I was losing my peripheral vision. So we would still partner with Homes Within Reach to have long-term affordability for that 99 years. I went over the community land trust model with you all before about how the homes would be in the home ownership of residents, the buyers of the home, but thank you, sorry for creating tension. But the land would be maintained by Homes Within Reach, so this would be an ongoing partnership with them. So I showed this model before, and in this case, unlike last time, we would seek, when the home is sold to the end buyer, we would seek those funds back, to go back into our pool of funds, to be recycled and be used for other programs. So we're looking for a $3 million for this program to do 6 homes. 1.8 million of it would come from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and 1.2 would come from Southdale TIF pooled funds. The 1.8 would stay with the land. The 1.2 would be repaid back to the city and put back into the Southdale TIF pooled funds for other affordable housing efforts. So the funds would be used for acquisition, rehabilitation, and project expenses. So we do anticipate being able to do about 6 homes with this program, with Habitat. So it'd be a line of credit that they could draw on upon finding a home, that they could be used for acquiring the home, rehabilitating it, and the program costs. We'd enter into a partnership with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, and it would be a 3-way partnership that would include Homes Within Reach. I did include a very preliminary draft that Habitat drafted in the packet of materials. Part of today's action is to getting authorization to work with our attorney. I didn't want to spend attorney costs prior to approval, so that may or may not dramatically change, in which case the attorney would work on making sure that the city's interests are protected. Approximately 1.8 again would be forgiven, 0% interest, 3-year term, and approximately 6 homes. So policy considerations. We have talked about that single-family ownership is an expensive lift. It's a lot. It's, over the term of affordability, it's still $200,000 to $300,000 per house in gap financing, where multifamily rental is significantly less money. But we are looking for a 99-year affordability period versus a 20 to 40-year affordability period. We are also looking for whether or not it has generational wealth and addressing the housing disparities that our state has been notorious for having. So, there's some trade-offs with a finite source of funding, whether or not it's in home ownership, whether or not it's in rental, even if it's all affordable. And then, as stated, it complies with the comprehensive plan and the Housing Strategy Task Force. So questions? And I apologize for
Nice
saying again,
presentation, thank you. Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me.
So I read through this draft agreement, and it seemed like there was a lot of stuff missing. And I know we're not approving it today, but all the meat of my questions appears to be in Exhibit A, which was not included.
Correct.
So some of the things that we've talked about in other programs are how do we ensure this remains affordable? Now, I know the land separated from the house is a big form of doing that, right? So the land goes into the land trust. But I know in our other program, there are limits on the amount of equity a family can maintain when they sell the home. And I think that will all be in that Exhibit A, but I didn't have Exhibit A. So I was really kind of stabbing in the dark to understand this. I think you answered my primary question is the land is a ground lease for 99 years, just as it is with our other homes within REACH programs. So that was important. One of the things that was in this agreement on page 3 that I thought was really confusing, I'll just read it and then I'll say what confuses me. The HRA will receive the sales price of the home minus the value of the land, rehabilitation costs, and project costs after the sale. I think we get the money after the sale and we're not paying project costs after the sale. But that, to me, sounded like kind of a strange phrase. And I just want to make sure that we're not continuing to pay costs for the homeowner after we've sold it to them. So we're not going to put on a new roof when it starts to leak or something. So that was in the draft, and I just want to be really sure that when we sell it, and we're not continuing to finance that home. So that was, I think, a drafting error, but that was one of the things. But other than that, I think this is a great program. I love bringing in a new partner. We've had a lot of the public ask to have Habitat for Humanity working in Edina, so I'm excited about this partnership.
Chair, Commissioner, I can address some of that, if I may.
Yes.
The project costs, the point of that, and I apologize if including that draft was confusing, is that on the day of sale, the homeowner will be paying the $200,000. We just need to make sure the books are complete before that $200,000 is handed over to us. There is no more expenses due by the buyer of the home. It's more of the what are the costs that Habitat, is there something, are all their costs being covered? The ground lease would be the same ground lease as our partnership with Homes Within Reach, since the ground lease is with Homes Within Reach, where there is an equity model where the homeowner upon sale keeps 35% of the accrued equity when they sell the home, so that 65% stays with the land.
Okay. Thank you.
So as a segue to the commissioner's question, what I assume from the nature of the motion is that you'll be coming back to us with legal documents that we need to approve at some point in time.
Chair, Commissioner, we can do that most definitely. Sometimes we put the faith in the attorney that whatever's being discussed here is represented in those documents for signing, but I will most definitely, I see expressions, I will most definitely bring that back for approval. Again, our city attorney emailed me and said, who drafted this? So he had not looked at it until he saw the packet, because I did not want to take his time.
You hear that nervous laugh from
his
Dave
billable
Kendall?
hours without authorization.
Yeah, all right. So, yeah, I don't think Dave Kendall wants to substitute his judgment for ours, but his advice would be good when we get a final document.
Mr. Mayor, I do not want to substitute my judgment for yours.
So I'd say, yeah, bring the final document back
Most
to us
definitely.
for his review, and then his advice to us as to, because there's lawyers up here that will want to take a close look at it too, as you can tell.
Most definitely, yes,
Okay.
based on that directive.
Other questions from other commissioners? Commissioner Risser, or comments too?
Just a comment. I like this program. When I think of Habitat for Humanity, partnering with Habitat for Humanity is a really positive thing, but I can't help but think the ground up, classic Habitat for Humanity project. And so I just want to float that out there as possibly something that could be done in the future, building from the ground up and doing it in a way so that we can demonstrate how houses could be built affordably and on a scale that is, sustainable. So I just wanted to float that.
Chair, Commissioners, I would love for there to be vacant land on which we could do programming like that. Today, we don't have it. But yes, definitely something to consider for future if an opportunity were to arise.
On Monday, I can help on that too, I think, a little bit. On Monday, I think Chris Coleman talked about the fact that COVID decimated their volunteer corps, where they would, they'd build these houses with volunteers. And that is part of the reason, at least, that they started going in multiple directions, this being one of them, to augment what they had traditionally done, as Member Risser was talking about, that ground up sort of work that Jimmy Carter was so famous for participating in. So, and maybe Noah has if he's online, he could comment on that as well, but I think it's been more difficult for them to do that traditional sort of work because of the lack of volunteers.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and Manager Hawkinson for the presentation. Yeah, to the extent that our programming changed, to say that it was extreme would probably be an understatement as a result of COVID. Typically, our site supervisors work with, about 18 new people every day inside a home. So obviously, when the pandemic hit, we had to essentially start from point zero and rework our building model. We brought in a lot more subcontractors, small teams of volunteers, small teams of staff to get the work done. Our production did, it took a little bit of a hit in the first 6 months or so, but eventually we put safety measures in place and got back to some semblance of normal, and now we're about all the way back, with the addition of expanding our home ownership opportunities kind of beyond the traditional Habitat look. So, thanks for bringing that point up. I'm excited to work in Edina. The organization is eager to. Our home buyers would be eager to. And I think the partnership between your city, ourselves, and Homes Within Reach is kind of a win-win-win. So really looking forward to it.
Thanks, Mr. Keller.
Thank you.
All right. The staff has requested that we adopt a motion to approve a $3 million line of credit to Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity from the sources designated that we have available, and authorize our attorney to assist in the preparation of legal documents for execution to accomplish that goal. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Agnew moves. Commissioner Pierce seconds that motion as stated. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
So
Commissioner Jackson.
That motion leaves open the room that we can look at the details of this deal before we have to sign anything, because we're committed to it, but I don't really know what we're committing to because this was an incomplete document.
Correct. That's my understanding of the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
It'll
you.
be back in front of the HRA for final scrutiny.
Okay, thank you.
With input from our attorney.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. All right. Any further questions, comments? All those in favor of adoption of the motion stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried? Be careful there.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong.
Okay. HRA Commissioner comments. Anybody have anything they wish to share?
Just briefly.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this evening, for those of you who are interested in affordable housing discussions, our Hennepin County Commissioner will be speaking with the League of Women Voters Edina here in the chamber, I believe, at 7:30. Where's it at?
Senior Center.
Oh, it's at the Senior Center. That's right. Thank you. At the Senior Center this evening at 7:30, I believe. 7? 7 o'clock. Thank you. I remember that on the way over here this morning, so I didn't bring my notes. Thank you. 7 o'clock, Senior Center, Commissioner LaTondra is talking about affordable housing. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
The motion to adjourn by Commissioner Pierce, seconded by Commissioner Risser. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjourning the HRA meeting on this Thursday, February 16th, 2023, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. HRA stands adjourned.
You did it by 9.